Welcome back, pugnacious pummelers. I'm Lupine Fiasco, this is Daily Fab Gameplay, and we are currently being flooded with Syndra spoilers. Now, you know me, I'm an aggro player, I love seeing red, but for those of you who want to see blue, I've got one last Jarl update for you. At the tail end of Rosetta, I've been playing Vero's Count Your Blessings Decompose list for the last few weeks. I have some ideas about what I want to incorporate into my deck, and today I'm going to be talking about those changes. Before then, I want to talk to you about subscribing to my YouTube channel. It is the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see every new episode of Daily Fab Gameplay in your YouTube feed. In the video description below, you can find a link to this deck list on Fabery, as well as my Patreon, Blue Sky, and Discord. The Patreon has the matchup guide for this deck, as well as weekly bonus content and plenty of other goodies. If you're into Syndra, subscribing to the Patreon will get you my deck list and matchup guide as I am building them. But for now, we're going to talk about Jarl, and specifically, we are going to talk about Count Your Blessings. So if we're looking at the latest changes to the deck list, you'll see that I am including all 6 legal copies of Count Your Blessings, as well as Terra Sunder, and what is being cut is Nullrune Hood, Glacial Footsteps, Cold Snap, Hypothermia, and Nerves of Steel. So we can talk about all of this very quickly, just go piece by piece, starting with Nullrune Hood. As I said in my last deck video, a number of deck builders, including Runaways and Vero, are choosing to just give up the Kano matchup, and I think that's fine. We are likely giving up the Verdance matchup as well. Jarl just has such a hard time dealing with Wizard. You need AB3. Even with AB3, there's a good chance that Kano can pump a Wildfire up to 7, such that you are mitigating 3 of that damage, you're taking 4, and now all of Kano's other spells are amped 4, specifically Open the Floodgates, which lets Kano draw 2 cards and keep going. So while you are making it harder for Kano to combo off, you aren't making it impossible. And our deck just doesn't really apply enough pressure to Kano to stop him from doing that, to stop him from just pitch stacking into Will of Arcana plus Kindle plus pitch to Crucible of Aetherwind, and that's what gets the Wildfire over the top. Or maybe he just draws into that and doesn't even need to reach pitch stack. Yes, our deck can do obnoxious things. We can double fuse Oakenold, we can send Spinal Crush with Pummel, we can do all sorts of nasty things that Kano has a problem dealing with, but what Kano can do in return is just block, chip in some damage, and eventually find that kill combo. So my list previously was running AB2, which is not nearly enough to deal with any of that. Kano with Will of Arcana plus Crucible of Aetherwind, or Kindle plus Crucible, was enough to get over the top of my Arcane Barrier and get that Open the Floodgates pumped to get its surge effect. So we would not only have to go up to AB3 to even have a chance of dealing with it, but then we aren't even stopping Kano from comboing, we're just making it a little bit harder for him to do so. So rather than overcommit with AB3, maybe even Oasis Respite, let's just give up the Kano matchup. If you pair into a Kano at your Road to Nationals or Calling, damn, that sucks. You should try to get better at Gem Roulette. But meanwhile, let's devote some resources into beating the heroes that we're maybe 50-50 against or 40-60 into, rather than try to affect those 10-90 matchups. Similarly, we have cut Glacial Footsteps. There are 2 reasons for this, one being that Glacial Footsteps is best at beating Enigma. Sending 10 damage, potentially with Dominate, can just be difficult for her to deal with if she doesn't have defense reactions in Arsenal, or if she doesn't have Ward that she can play out. Sometimes Enigma's means of protecting Miragai is just blocking with 3 or 4 cards from hand, and Glacial Footsteps with Dominate says she can't do that. Sometimes 10 damage even without Dominate is just too much for Enigma to really deal with. So Glacial Footsteps was a way to address Enigma, but like Kano, let's not commit resources to these 10-90 matchups. Let's just try not to pair into them. So if we're cutting Glacial Footsteps, which is effectively a 6 for 10, it is a 3-card 10, By removing it to include Count Your Blessings, which can easily equal 4 points of value, we are still getting our 3-card 10, albeit with Sledge of Anvilheim plus Count Your Blessings. So Footsteps doesn't necessarily come out because it's bad. I think the card is very good. I've had good success with Glacial Footsteps in the Guardian Mirror, against Riptide, against other slower decks. Even Enigma has been scared by Glacial Footsteps. But we can just replace it with a different means of getting value, and I've been very impressed by Count Your Blessings. I think it's a little easier to get value out of than Footsteps. Let's do Count Your Blessings. Cold Snap is a great card. I love Cold Snap. I prefer it over Polar Blast, and I thought Polar Blast was a great card. You fuse it with your Oaken-Old. You could have fused it with Glacial Footsteps, and once you have revealed it to the fuse effect, you just put it into Arsenal, and from Arsenal, it is a very good play. You draw a card, you freeze your opponent's Arsenal if they don't give you a resource. If they're missing armor pieces, your Jarl trigger gives them a Frostbite. I think Cold Snap is really good. There are 2 problems with Cold Snap, in my opinion. The first is that it blocks 2 and not 3. The second is that it costs 1 and not 3, and what that says is it is harder for us to play defense with Cold Snap. If we're blocking, we lose a point of value compared to Tear Asunder, and if we are pitching to our Titan's Fist, it only attacks for 3 rather than the 4 that it would attack with if we pitched Tear Asunder. Tear Asunder on its own is also a really nice way to end a game. If your opponent doesn't have armor, if they don't have an arsenal, or if you're convinced that their arsenal is not a defense reaction, then you get to push 5 damage with a Tear Asundered Titan's Fist, take 2 cards out of their hand, and potentially push lethal damage. Cold Snap doesn't let you do that. So Cold Snap is really only good for playing out of Arsenal and fusing, and if we're cutting Glacial Footsteps, then we have 1 less target to fuse Cold Snap with. I'm down on the card. I would replace it with Tear Asunder, which I've been very impressed with. And Nerves of Steel, sort of in that same vein. Yes, it pitches for 3 to turn on Titan's Fist. Yes, it blocks for 3, but it served a very specific purpose in the Assassin matchup, where it would let you block a dagger with your Stalagmite, and then not put a Battle 1 counter on your Stalagmite because the dagger only attacked for 1. But what we are choosing to do instead now against Assassin is fatigue them with Sledge and Count Your Blessings. So if we aren't bringing Stalagmite into the Assassin matchup, then Nerves of Steel doesn't do anything. It only served one purpose, which was to keep your Stalagmite around, and now we're cutting Stalagmite. So that is why I have removed the 9 cards from the list that I have removed. We can talk about the 3 sets of 3 that I'm adding in. We'll start with Tear Asunder just because it is the simplest to explain, and I've already done a bit of that. It's just a generally good card. It blocks for 3, it pitches to Titan's Fist to attack for 4, and it is a great way to end a game. It pairs well with Titan's Fist. It can pair well with Oaken-Old. Even if you aren't fusing the Oaken-Old, you still attack for 8 with Dominate. On hit, the opposing hero discards 2 cards. There is a way off of 5 cards to turn your Spinal Crush into 10 with Dominate. On hit, opponent discards 2 cards and can't do more than 1 action in their turn. All of their cards lose, go again. It's great for pitch stacking, either on purpose or by accident. It works with your Sledge as well, off of a 3-card hand with Tunic. It's just a generally good card at everything you need it to do. It is disruptive, it is evasive, it is good on defense, it pitches to Titan's Fist. Whatever we want Tear Asunder to do, it usually will. I've been very impressed with the card, and I want to play with it. Count Your Blessings, finally, is the main addition to the list here. We're bringing in all 6, because the card just turns our mid-range matchups into much easier wins. If we're playing against Riptide, against other Guardian, Against these slower, grindier decks that can't adequately pressure us, Count Your Blessings not only gives us 30 more life over the course of a very long game, it gives us ways to convert our hand on offense. If we have tempo, we are drawing cards that we can play because they don't take our action point. And if our Count Your Blessings were Glacial Footsteps, Hypothermia, Nerves of Steel, we might not be able to use 4 cards. We might be taking an intellect penalty. Count Your Blessings works very well with our deck's cost curve. We have a number of plays that leave us with a floating resource after we pitch 1 or 2 blues. We can pop over into the deck itself and see what those plays are. We have Command and Conquer, which costs 2. We have Frostfang, which costs 2. We have Mangle, which costs 4, leaving us with 2 floating resources after we pitch a blue. And we have Spinal Crush, which costs 5. So all of our big, dumb attacks float 1 or 2 resources after we pitch 1 or 2 blues. And with our Fiandal Spring Tunic, we have that floating resource to play a Count Your Blessings. We also have it to play a Pummel, which is largely what we use that Tunic resource for, and that is another advantage of Count Your Blessings. You pitch a blue, you attack with Command and Conquer, you float a resource, your Tunic is up, you have a card in hand or in arsenal. Your opponent assumes that this is a Pummel. You're at least representing it. Your opponent needs to decide how much they respect the Pummel. So let's say they even go in hard. Let's say that your opponent has 4 3-blocks in hand, has a card in arsenal that they really want. It's a combo piece. And they say, you know what? If this combo piece in arsenal gets destroyed and if I discard a card to the Pummel, I have no turn. I'm going to play very defensive. I'm going to block 10, 11, or 12 on the Command and Conquer and respect the Pummel. You say, great, Tunic, Count Your Blessings. Your opponent lost all their tempo, you gained anywhere from 3 to 8 life, and then you go on with the rest of the game. Even if you don't have the Pummel, your opponent is going to respect it. Even if they don't block around the Pummel, it's something they need to consider, and that can give you an edge when you instead play Count Your Blessings. Count Your Blessings lets you just gain life over the course of a game, and in the games where you are playing Count Your Blessings, you are also playing Sledge with Anvilheim. Sledge is our best, easiest, most frequent 2-card 6 that floats 2 resources for Count Your Blessings. This is why I talked about replacing Glacial Footsteps, a 3-card 10, with Sledge with Anvilheim and Count Your Blessings, a 3-card 10 that could potentially be even more value than that. In so many of our slower matchups, we're bringing in Sledge, which lets you turn 2 blues into 6 damage without losing any cards from your deck. You can potentially turn 1 blue into 6 damage if your Fiandal Spring Tunic is up, but this also curves out very well into playing Count Your Blessings for 2 resources. It lets you convert large hands when you are on offense, when you have tempo, even without drawing your big dumb attacks. And it just gives you more flexibility to take damage on turns where you want to keep 4 cards in hand. If you've gained 30 life over the course of the game, and your opponent really pops off with their big aggressive turn, you feel much better about not blocking because your hand is a blue, an Oaken Old, an Earth card, and an Ice card. If you've gained 30 life, you feel much better about keeping your Command and Conquer and Pummel with Tunic, or maybe you're blocking very hard over your Pummel in arsenal to protect it because you know that you can have an end game with Sledge and you can just find your attacks to Pummel. Things we are still keeping on the list: Exposed to the Elements. I just like the card. I think it's great. Even with a lower Earth count, you are still getting the second half of the card, which is the important part. I think that Staunch Response is a very playable card in a meta with New. In a Dark Horse meta where Dorinthia might come out of nowhere to try and get you, I think that a weakness of Vero's list, at least that I experienced with my playstyle, was only having 1 set of defense reactions rather than 6. I also didn't like that the list had Rootbound Carapace as opposed to Sink Below. Sink Below being an extra point of block all of the time, regardless of whether you can decompose, and being a way to fix an all red or 3 red, 1 blue hand. by turning one of those reds into a blue is just very good. I think that Spinal Crush is too good of a card in the current meta to not play, especially when we are considering the synergy with Fyendal Tunic, Pummel, and Count Your Blessings. And overall, some of the other pieces that I had to cut to play Vero's list, including Red Winter's Bite, just didn't sit very well with me. I enjoy the ice tempo plan that I have going on here. I think it's very good, and think that Count Your Blessings is only going to be an addition to that. Outside of that, the list mostly remains the same as it was previously. You can see, compared to my last list of changes, this one is much less dramatic, less drastic, and I think it's going to serve you very well. So go out, explore the deck, practice with it. I'll be doing some of that myself ahead of the Hunted, though I concede that I will be playing much more with Syndra than I will with Jarl in the coming weeks, though I will revisit him, of course. That is one of my pledges for 2025, to review older heroes more often, including Jarl, Aurora, KO, even Fi, though Fi shoots up in priority now that he seems to be getting at least some support in the Hunted. Friday, I'll be looking at the Hunted spoilers we've seen up until then, and next week, we'll be starting on some real Syndra deck building now that we have the entire set of the Hunted spoiled to us. If you enjoyed this video, if you think that this deck has some wheels, if you're excited to try it, go ahead and pummel that like button. My comments are always open for any questions or feedback. If you haven't already done so, please consider a YouTube subscription. It's free, it helps me out a lot. My Patreon, Discord, and Blue Sky info is all in the video description below. Thank you so much for joining me on this Jarl adventure. It was very refreshing to get a break from aggro, try the dark side of mid-range, and especially the dark side of ice bullying. But it's time to wake up, get back to the real world, and until then, stay frosty.